The biggest mistake you can ever make is to allow the narcissist to cause clutter in your home. Narcissistic abuse leaves more than just emotional scars. It can create a whirlwind of disarray in your living space. Your living condition greatly affects your mood, productivity, and overall well-being. You should take control and care of your house as you dwell in it daily. Today, we're going to explore the 10 reasons why so many victims of narcissistic abuse experience clutter in their homes. Are you ready for number 1? Trauma response. Imagine your home becoming a fortress of clutter, not because you love chaos, but because it makes you feel grounded in a world that's been turned upside down by narcissistic abuse. It's like a weird, messy security blanket that gives you a sense of control when everything else feels out of control. Dr. Sherry Campbell, a psychologist who specializes in narcissistic abuse recovery, often points out that clutter can be a way to cope with trauma, almost like a protective layer against the emotional wounds you've experienced. It's not just about stuff, it's about creating a space where you feel safe, even if that means surrounding yourself with piles of things. Let's talk about number 2. Mind clutter equals space. Clutter. Think of your mind like a mirror that reflects into your living space. When you're dealing with the chaos of narcissistic abuse, your thoughts can feel all jumbled up and messy, and that mental clutter starts spilling out into your home. It's like your environment becomes a physical representation of what's going on inside your head. Dr. Gabor Mate, an expert on trauma, often says that our external world mirrors our internal state, and that clutter around you can sometimes be a sign that you're carrying a lot of emotional baggage. So when your mind is overwhelmed, it's no surprise that your space ends up looking overwhelmed too. Let's move on to number 3. Overloading responsibilities. Imagine you're juggling so many tasks and responsibilities that you barely have a moment to breathe, let alone clean your home. When someone has been a victim of narcissistic abuse, they're often left drowning in responsibilities. It leaves them with zero time or energy for tidying up. Dr. Judith Orloff, a psychiatrist who deals with trauma, points out that when people are overwhelmed by constant demands, their environment can quickly become chaotic. It's like your home gets buried under the weight of everything you're trying to handle. It's hard to keep things in order when you're already stretched thin. Now let's continue to number 4. Hoarding tendencies. When you've been through narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself holding on to stuff more than you used to, and it's not just because you're a pack rat. It's often a coping mechanism that helps you deal with the emotional fallout. Dr. Jennifer McKinney, a therapist who works with trauma survivors, explains that people sometimes develop hoarding tendencies as a way to create a sense of security and control when everything else feels so unpredictable. By clinging to things, you're trying to build a buffer against the chaos and uncertainty you've faced. So if you notice clutter piling up, it might be more about your emotional need for stability than just a lack of organization. You shouldn't miss number 5. Procrastination. You might find yourself constantly putting off cleaning tasks, saying you'll get to it later, and it's not just about laziness. For many victims of narcissistic abuse, procrastination can be a way of coping with overwhelming emotions and stress. Dr. David Tolan, a psychologist who studies hoarding and procrastination, says that delaying chores often happens because the task feels too daunting or emotionally draining. When you've been through abuse, even simple tasks like cleaning can feel like a mountain to climb. So you keep pushing them to the back burner. It's a way to avoid facing the stress or anxiety that comes with those tasks, even though it ends up adding to the clutter around you. Are you still up for number 6? Control issues. When you've been a victim of narcissistic abuse, you might notice your home is cluttered because the abuser used to control how things were done, including how your space should be organized. It's like they imposed their own rules on you, leaving you feeling powerless and unable to make decisions about your own space. Dr. Melanie Greenberg, a psychologist who focuses on trauma, points out that this kind of control can lead to a chaotic environment because you're left struggling to reclaim your space and your choices. After the abuse, you might find yourself stuck in old patterns, and dealing with clutter becomes another way of grappling with that loss of control. Let's keep it moving to number 7. Undermining efforts. If you've been through narcissistic abuse, you might notice that no matter how hard you try to clean up your space, it always seems to get messed up again. It can be because the narcissist often undermines your efforts, either by creating more mess or by making you feel like your efforts don't matter. Dr. Laura Berman, a relationship therapist, explains that this constant undermining can make you feel defeated and less motivated to keep your space tidy. It's like trying to swim upstream. Every time you clean, it feels like there's another wave of chaos coming at you, making it hard ever to feel truly organized. Here comes number 8, projection. Projection is a sneaky tactic often used by narcissists where they shift their disorganization and chaos onto you, making you feel responsible for their mess. Dr. Nancy Collier, a psychotherapist specializing in narcissistic abuse, explains that this projection is a strategic move to deflect blame and place the problem squarely on your shoulders. Essentially, the narcissist creates a situation where their disorder becomes your burden. You might find yourself feeling overwhelmed by their clutter, as if it's a reflection of your failures or something you should be able to fix. This constant emotional manipulation not only affects your mental well-being, but can also lead to struggles in maintaining a clean and organized space, as the lines between their chaos and your responsibilities become blurred. We are moving on to number 9. False promises. Imagine this. You're knee-deep in clutter, and the narcissist in your life promises to help clean up. They sound all sincere, as if they're auditioning for a role in a cleaning commercial. But guess what? They never show up with the mop and bucket. Dr. Martha Beck, a life coach and expert on narcissism, points out that narcissists are great at making promises they never keep. It's just to keep you hanging on and hoping. It's like they're throwing you a lifeline that's really just a decoy, making you think help is on the way while you're stuck wading through piles of clutter. So if you're drowning in the mess while they're nowhere to be seen, it's not your organizational skills at fault. It's their knack for being all talk and zero action. Finally, we're down to number 10, fear of reprisal. If you've been a victim of narcissistic abuse, you might find yourself holding on to clutter because you're afraid of the narcissist's reaction if you throw things away. It's like you're walking on eggshells, worrying that any decision you make about your space could trigger their anger or punishment. Dr. Patricia Evans, a communication expert on narcissism, explains that this fear of reprisal can make you feel paralyzed, unable to get rid of things even if you know they're just adding to the mess. You end up with clutter not just because of the stuff itself, but because you're trying to avoid upsetting someone who's already made you feel like you can't trust your own choices. If your home feels like it's drowning in clutter, it's not just a sign of disorganization. It's a peek into the emotional mess that comes from dealing with narcissistic abuse. The constant stress, self-doubt, and exhaustion can make even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming, and the result often ends up as a home that's as chaotic as your mind might feel. But here's the good news. Recognizing this pattern is the first step towards reclaiming your space and your peace of mind. Taking small steps to clear out the clutter can also help clear out some of that emotional baggage. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress and finding a way to make your home a place where you can feel safe and at ease again.